Good evening, Canby. Welcome to the Canby City, Urban Renewal District Budget Committee meeting, as well as the City of Canby's regular budget meeting this evening. We have a lot of ground to cover over this evening, and so I think we're going to do a quick roll call vote to make sure we've got everybody here.
Mr. Mayor, just a little bit of a point of order. I forgot to talk to you about this, and I apologize, but did you want to do the urban renewal budget first this evening and then go back to the city budget? Was that?
If it's all right with the group, we've got somebody that's in Zoom from out of town, or that's out of town that would be here. And so we'd like to knock out the urban renewal district budget first. And then we'll get back to the city budget that was started last week.
Thank you.
So we need to do a roll call.
Here.
Chris, you're here? Good. Counselor Bangs is here. And then budget committee member Elizabeth Chapin.
Recording in progress.
That's me.
So why don't we start roll call again, and we'll just start there with Mr. Counselor Bangs and go around the table.
I'm here.
Hi.
So yes, state your name.
Chris Bangs.
Elizabeth Chapin.
Council President Tracy Hensley.
Jack Pendleton.
Councilor Sean Varwood.
Herman Maldonado.
Mayor Hodson and co-chair for the budget committees.
Greg Parker here.
Michelle Hensley here.
Councilor Sarah Spoon here.
Councilor Art Marine here.
City Attorney Joseph Lindsay.
City Administrator Scott Archer.
Finance Director Eric Haitola.
City Recorder Melissa Bissett.
Mr. Nelzine.
City of Canby, Jerry Nelzine. City of Canby, Todd Wood. City of Canby, Spencer Block.
City of Canby, James Dale.
Eric Hart.
Okay. Pardon me? I'm sorry. And then in the corner, Valerie.
Nancy Muller.
Welcome back, Nancy. And then on, thank you. And then on Zoom.
You've got all sorts of advice.
I know, I've got all sorts of help. This is great. Kara, do you want to unmute yourself and then introduce? Or are you unmuted?
Sorry, Kara Hawkins
Perfect.
here.
Great. All right, well, welcome everybody. We're going to move in, and so under old business, we have approval of the minutes from the May 13th, 2021 Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting.
I move to accept the minutes of the May 13, 2021 meeting.
I'll second.
Was that you, Council President, or I guess Commissioner Hensley? Motion's been made by Commissioner Varwig and seconded by Commissioner Hensley to approve the minutes from the May 13th, 2021 Urban Renewal Budget Committee meeting. Any questions, comments, or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? All right, that motion carries. New business, we have under there, first item A is receive the budget message.
Thank you, Chair, Vice Chair Hodson, Urban Renewal Agency Budget Committee members. Again, Scott Archer, City Administrator. I'm also the Director. Thank you, Agency Director. Thank you, everybody, for Urban Renewal. It's a dual hat with our sort of separation of some of the powers with the Urban Renewal Agency, and that's also why it has its own separate budget, even though it is a city function. This will be a pretty short budget message. As you see, this is a pretty abbreviated budget, and it's fairly straightforward. So I'll just give you a brief budget message with the highlights, and then Finance Director Eric Kaitola will kind of walk you through that real quick, and be happy to answer any questions. So I am happy to present your 2022-23 Urban Renewal Agency budget in the amount of $8,029,000. $765. The Urban Renewal Agency has a couple of, the budget has a couple of different funds in it. The first of those is the general fund. And in the general fund, that accounts for our agency administration. So, you know, some of the internal services to operate the Urban Renewal Agency. It supports our economic development activities and our staffing within the Urban Renewal Agency area. It also supports construction projects and any property purchase that the district might make. The way that this works is the Urban Renewal Agency is a smaller district within the city. It's I won't go into a long dissertation about what it is. I think most of you probably know, but Urban Renewal Agency is a tool that the city has to essentially its main purpose is to rid the city of blighted areas, improve certain portions of the city that are identified within the district, and to follow an Urban Renewal Agency plan that has been adopted to do things that essentially improve the city within those areas and do basically mostly public improvement types of project that spur basically getting rid of the blight or encouraging other development to happen that improve that and also lift up our tax base and it's an economic development driver for the city. So when those projects are completed by the agency, they are transferred to the city's ownership. So they're Urban Renewal Agency projects that then become the city's projects. The other fund in Urban Renewal Agency is the Debt Service Fund. And this accounts for the tax revenue that comes in as a result of the Urban Renewal District. It also accounts for the annual debt payments that we make. So the projects and the way the Urban Renewal Agency operates is on a debt basis, and then we repay that with the tax revenue that we receive that comes into the district. Transfers from the URA Debt Service Fund to the general fund. So we bring in money in the debt fund, and then we transfer it to the agency's own general fund, pay for the projects and expenditures in this budget. So that's just kind of how the mechanics of this budgeting works. Within the proposed budget for 22-23, some of the highlights. So consistent with previous years, economic development activities are supported through the Urban Renewal Agency. It supports our downtown and community types of projects. And we also are proposing a new mural program within the Urban Renewal budget in this coming year's budget. It also supports Canby's involvement in our regional economic development partnerships and activities. So that continues to be supported. Some projects that are proposed in this fiscal year 22-23 budget. Completion of some upgrades that we would like to make to Community Park that includes replacing and building 2 new restrooms, putting in new sewer and water lines, and then improving parking and creating additional parking. So that's one of the projects. Another project is funding, and it says in this budget it's partial funding because it's going to be a project that will happen over the course of probably 2 or possibly 3 years as the gateway improvements to the Logging Road Bridge on the north end of town. It includes creating a new trail access from up above on the trail down to 99. So it's kind of the Fred Meyer complex access that we've been talking about for some time. It includes beautification of the bridge, some art installation, some lights, and then some landscaping and other beautification down below. This budget also, as far as projects goes, includes continuation of the facade improvement program, which is an ongoing urban renewal program. And then again, this one also includes the creation of a mural program. So the bottom line is this is a balanced budget for urban renewal. It's very straightforward. It represents the adopted goals of the agency, and it follows those goals. And so with that, I would like to turn it over to Eric to let him walk you through the numbers very quickly. Oh, and again, we have we'll have, if you want to follow along either at your places on anything that you've got in front of you, or you're welcome to look at the screen and follow we'll have these worksheets as we go along this evening on the screen.
Can you go to the general fund budget? Okay, here we're looking at, okay, so between the FY22 budget and the FY23 budget in the revenue, you can see that there's roughly $1 million increase there, which is directly related to the down below. Can you scroll down a little? So materials and services are roughly the same numbers this year and proposed and this year. But in the capital outlay, you can see that it's $410,000 in FY22 and $1,388,000. So the $1 million increase in capital outlay projects there is related to the $1 million increase in the revenue shown up above. Scott already talked about the capital projects. Does anyone have any questions about the capital projects? Okay. Or anything else on that sheet? Okay, we can move on to the debt service fund. So as Scott said, the debt service fund collects all the property tax revenue, which is shown in the upper half. And last year there was roughly 6.6, or this year $6.6 million budgeted for, and next year we're projecting 6.1 million of revenue. If you could scroll down to there you go, thank you. So the total debt service requirements for FY22 is 6.6 million, and proposed for next year is 6.1 million basically. You can see through the debt servicing stuff that a lot of the debt was rolled over and refinanced into just one principal payment and two interest payments per year. So saving some money on the debt payments there. Any questions? Yes, sir.
Yeah, the tax increment, how much of that comes back to the city when the URG is retired?
I don't know the
Well,
answer to that. That's a good question.
Yeah, that is a good question. We're going to be talking about that probably at length with regard to as we come towards, what is, at least right now, is planned to sunset the district in 25, 26. We'll be doing some financial analysis as to what the new tax increment that is created that would be rolling back to the city coffers. Is that what you're asking, Jack?
Yes, how much do we
Yeah.
pay, how much to schools and fire, and all
Yeah.
those other lines on the property tax?
That is a perfect question, and it is one that is going to require us to do a good bit of financial analysis, and when we get the opportunity to do that, we're going to be having some conversation. That might be, we've had some conversations about having mid-year budget meetings with budget committees, including Urban Renewal Budget Committee. So that's, I think, if you'll indulge us, Jack, I think that's a perfect kind of an exercise that we would do when we come back with these, mid-year check-ins, or, even going into the next budget cycle. I think bringing back some analysis to the committee of here's what this means when we eventually close the district. Because yes, our tax collection to the city general fund will increase pretty significantly. Yeah.
That's all I got for URA.
One other note is, I should have mentioned this in my opening comments, something very significant that we did last year with the urban renewal, and I think a lot of you know this, is because of the very low, historically low interest rates with loans, we were able to refinance the district debt and save over $6 million, which the the city council members, as the Urban Renewal Agency, have had some conversations about and have enacted, moving forward on some of the projects that they would like to do, which are reflected in this budget. But a very significant effort that we did over this last year to save the district $6 million in financing. And so the discussion was, do we fold that back in? Do we pay it off early? Do we use that for projects? And so as of right now, the Urban Renewal Agency has given us the direction to begin spending part of that and then have some further discussions about what we do with the remaining debt that we have available. So we'll have some continued conversation on that, but a very positive thing we did last year with our debt and our financing.
Okay. I guess we'll move into, if there's nothing else from you two gentlemen, we'll move into committee discussion. Any thoughts, comments that want to be made? Commissioner Spoon?
Yeah, I just wanted to thank you for moving the mural budget in. And also I noticed that the facade improvement program had an increase, which I think is actually from 5 years ago, probably not still as high as it was 5 years ago because we decreased it for a period of time. But I just want to acknowledge that the work that economic development and the city is doing in terms of having that facade improvement money go towards exciting projects that do reduce blight and improve the overall look of the community has been really great in the last few years. And so I'm excited to see those two adjustments in the budget.
Thank you, Commissioner. I have two questions, and I think you answered my second one. In regards to materials and services, Scott, it looks like once when we look at annual expenses, including the kind of the general and administration aspect of the materials and services, we are still anticipating that coming into our city budget conversation in 26-27, correct? If the urban renewal district is closed.
Oh, I see what you're saying. Yeah. Oh. So you're saying if right? Let me clarify to make sure I'm understanding. You're saying if when urban renewal closes to continue to fund our economic development activities, we would then need to roll those into the city's general fund,
Right.
Right? Is that what you're asking about?
Right.
Yes, correct.
So
we would anticipate that, and I think a good part of that answer goes back to Mr. Pendleton's good question, which is our revenues will increase. So in theory, we could roll that right in, and have the offsetting revenue to continue to support those efforts. I would assume that the city wants to continue its economic development efforts, and so yes.
yeah, I mean, it's the economic development efforts, but it's also, there's for example, city administrator salary,
Parts
a
of the-
portion of that comes out of the urban renewal district right now that will then have to roll into the city
That is
budget,
correct.
absorbing that along with some of the economic development pieces as well.
Yes. Yeah, so we would be anticipating that when we close the district, yes.
Okay, which then I think leads to my second question, which is what Jack which is I think what Jack asked when that was making sure that we as the urban renewal district commissioners and I guess the budget committee start having dialogue about what that's gonna look like. The revenue from urban renewal that's gonna come to the city. If we're anticipating $1 million, but we're gonna see X amount of dollars of that being spent on G&A being rolled back into the city's regular budget, what is that then? And then what other areas are we gonna see that money be dedicated to? We've got $50,000 in annual expense for the quiet zone, and, is that money that we're gonna have, or is that gonna be part? So just some of those aspects where we should be looking at probably as we roll in towards next year's budget and the following budget for urban renewal. We'll be looking at that, I think, for both this group and the city budget group.
Agreed, yeah, and I think
that's what Jack was commenting on as well,
Yeah.
so.
Yeah, I think it all goes to that, and those are definitely policy types of discussions and decisions, and we'll want to work to that. But again, I want to kind of reiterate this idea that I know some of you have asked for this, and we're working on getting towards having not just one budget cycle or a couple of budget meetings in a couple of weeks in a row per year, but actually doing this maybe a mid-year or whatever the desire of the committee might be to have some check-ins during the year. But I think we're going to really want to start ramping up those types of conversations because we're heading towards when we're getting into that's in our sight now, that closure date and how that's all going to transpire.
Well, I think it's, yeah, I mean, I think that's the first policy conversation is, is it are we unwinding and closing, or is it restructuring, or what is that gonna look like? So I think that's probably where we should start first. Commissioner Hensley?
Thank you. I think part of my question, I had two. Part of it, I think, was answered. We're going to talk about the quiet zone yearly in future discussions about when that money comes back to the general fund. That's going to be part of that discussion, not just economic development. Is that what I heard?
Look, yeah, that was just an
Okay.
example I was using as something that we've taken on as a city
Right.
because of an urban renewal project, and then, where does that money necessarily start coming
Yeah,
from?
that was one thing that popped in my head. It's quiet zone. We got to pay for that every year. And Scott, you may have already explained this, and I might have missed it, so I apologize. But under the Grant Street Arch, there's $238,000 proposed for the next budget year. What is left to do that requires that much money? Because the arch is kind of already up.
Yeah, Jerry, do you have any, could you come up to well, we don't have we didn't get a staff microphone.
Oh, yeah.
Taking so long, I think it's money just in case it goes into that.
Okay, yeah, okay, I
So
can
it's
just.
just rolled over?
Yeah.
Okay.
I believe Tracy does, because we should be done, consider what's raining.
I saw him out painting stripes. That's good. Okay, thank you.
Just so since our microphones didn't pick that up for anybody, the question or the answer to that was essentially we carried some of the money forward just to make sure that we absolutely had all the final expenses because that project is just on the tail end of getting everything completed and wrapped up. So we're just making sure we had it covered.
To speak to that piece, we had some feedback today from, I believe it was Fire Chief Davis, or was it Chief Tro? Chief Tro brought up in an earlier meeting just that he's had a lot of compliments from people from outside our community about the arch and just kind of the bow that kind of puts on that look into the entrance to downtown. And I want to thank Public Works and staff for the high school congratulations class of 22 banners that we've attached to that. I think that's the idea of part of what we wanted to be able to utilize the arch project for, to be able to announce things and celebrate Canby in a lot of ways. So it's a good start. So I know striping is happening in fits and spurts. So, but perfect. Any other comments or discussion items on the urban renewal budget? Commissioner Spoon?
I'll make a motion if you're ready.
Okay, I think we're ready. Yeah.
I move that the Budget Committee of the Canby Urban Renewal Agency approve the budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year in the amount of $8,029,765 and to levy property taxes for the 2022-2023 fiscal year for the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under Section 1C, Article 11 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457.
Second.
The motion has been made by Commissioner Spoon and seconded by Commissioner Marine to approve the budget committee, that the budget committee of the Canby Urban Renewal Agency approve the budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year in the amount of $8,029,765 and to levy property taxes for the 2022 and 2023 fiscal year for the maximum amount of revenue that may be raised by dividing the taxes under Section 1C, Article 11 of the Oregon Constitution and ORS Chapter 457. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? That motion passes.
Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Eric. Thank you, Scott. Appreciate that. If there's no other business regarding the Urban Renewal Agency budget, I will take a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Hensley and seconded by Commissioner Spoon to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, we are adjourning the Canby Urban Renewal District Budget Committee meeting as of now. Okay. I will call to order the City of Canby Budget Committee, regular city budget committee meeting for May 26th, 2022. And again, we'll start with Mr. Arndt there at the other end of the table, and just introduce yourself and whether you're a city councilor or community budget member.
Eric Arndt, community budget member.
Chris Bangs, counselor.
Elizabeth Chapin, committee member.
Tracy Hensley, Council President.
Jack Hamilton, Budget Committee.
Sean Barwick, city councilor.
Herman Maldonado, community member.
Brian Hodson, city councilor, council member, mayor.
Greg Parker, City Council.
Michelle Hensley, member.
Sarah Spoon, City Council.
Art Marine, city council.
Joseph Lindsay, city attorney.
Scott Archer, city administrator.
Eric Haitola, Finance Director.
Melissa Bissett, city recorder.
Johnny Nelson, City of Canby.
Wood Transit Fleet Director.
Bishop Pollock, City of Canby.
Jamie Stickle, City of Canby.
Okay. Appreciate everyone being here. Thank you for indulging me not being here last week, and thank you for allowing me to be co-chair for the budget committees this year. I appreciate it. We'll move into old business, and so we need to approve the minutes from the May 21st, 2021 budget committee meeting.
Mr. Mayor, I move to approve the minutes from the May 21st, 2021 Budget Committee meeting.
Second.
Motion's been made by Council President Hensley and seconded by Councilor Varwick to approve the minutes from the May 21st, 2021 Budget Committee meeting. Any discussion or comment? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Any abstentions? The minutes are approved. Thank you. Item B under old business, questions from the May 19th, 2022 Budget Committee meeting. I didn't see anything, or don't recall seeing anything. We had one.
I think we had one, yeah, you wanna?
There was a question from Councilor Hensley about the number of new employee. There was a question from Councilor Hensley and about the planning budget and the number of new full-time employees, and there's just one
One new full-time employee in finance.
new full-time employee.
Thank you.
So before we move into the new funds for the evening, are there any comments or questions that maybe weren't sent in or that want to be made regarding what we discussed or what was discussed last budget meeting? Okay. Then we'll move into new business, and that's moving through our remaining portion of our budget. I will shoot for us to take a break at 7:30. Whether you need it or not, we will just take a break and stretch our legs and grab delicious cookies that were supplied by Economic Development in our Public Works team. So first up is the Transient Room Fund, which can be found on page 86 in your budget packet.
And I'm just gonna, as a continuation of the last meeting, I'll just turn it over to Eric to walk you through each of these different budgets and funds.
Okay, the Transient Room Tax Fund. Proceeds from the Transient Room Tax Fund, tourism programs that promote community events and attractions and supports the development of new tourism assets and attractions. Is it gonna be difficult to pull up the new packet? Okay. So we're looking at the new packet that was emailed out earlier this week. And so if we're looking at the FY22 budget number under resources first. There we go. Is roughly 63,000, and then for the FY 23 proposed is 67,000, so pretty close to same as last year. It's just a factor of there wasn't as much spent this year, or FY 22 as expected. So if we can scroll down, yeah, so FY 22 budget, materials and services is 10,000 and 10,000 this year. For tourism enhancement, requirements for FY 22 were 14,000. For 23, we're proposing 10,000. And that's about it for here. Anyone have any questions?
Counselor Spoon?
Couple of questions. I know that from asking Scott privately, that we do receive some funds from Airbnb for transient room tax. Do we also get funds from like vacation rental by owner, Vacasa, like the other vacation rental sites for ones that are booked through there?
Yeah, we need to do some additional research on that. I think, yeah, we had a conversation about that a little while back, and I think that's kind of a thing that we're catching up to and figuring out how to track those. So the answer is I'm not certain how good of a job we're doing, but we need to take a better look at how well we track those.
Yeah, I'm not sure there's a perfect way to track it, so
Yeah.
totally understandable. Now, the way that the transient room fund is designed, does it require them to have a business license and all of that? And are we following up on that as well? That they be licensed businesses and pay towards our CAT as well?
I think so, yeah.
Okay.
So if people are doing business or even attempting to do business in town, they're supposed to get a business license. So it is true that they should have a business license, and that's usually one of the ways in which it triggers, oh, I'm going to be an Airbnb business here, and then we remind them at that trigger point, hey, you're going to have to collect this. But if they don't, it's a little bit harder. We have had some sleuthing done by our business licensed person, Erin Burkhart, and she's actually caught some people online and then went around and kind of figured out who they were. So there has been some sleuthing, but it's a bigger job than it would look like.
Yeah, totally understandable. There's no like guidebook on how to handle new economic venues. So.
Yeah, I think that's a great question, Counselor Spoon, and I know that we've brought that up, seems like the last couple of years, because it is an increasing piece here, even here in Canby, and how do you manage that? How do you circle that? And when talking with a couple other mayors, that is a common issue throughout most of the city's budgets in terms of how do you capture that aspect. So, great. Counselor Bangs, you have a question?
I had a question on Airbnbs. I think we're good.
Okay, thank you. Any other questions on this fund? Okay, we'll move on to system development charges.
Okay, the purpose of this fund is to record SDC revenue and maintain the restricted balances so that we're in compliance with allowable use and we can control in accordance with state statutes. Okay. In the revenue section, for this year, we've got like 13.168 million. We're proposing 14.393 million. Those are just SDC fees collected through all the projects that are happening in town. So the more projects that are happening, the more SDC fees that are collected. The transfers in and out are when so it says transfer to park, street, sewer, storm. When those funds are using SDC fees, then this fund is transferring money to those funds. Reserve for future expenditure, that's because we're collecting those SDC fees for a very specific purpose, so we're tracking them by those purposes. And so, yeah, that's the SDC fund. Let's see, in FY '22, budgeted transfers out was 2.3 million, 2.28 million. We're proposing 4.14 million. So the large increase is just due to the number of capital projects we're proposing that will be able to use the SDC fees.
And we talked in pretty good length about some of our capital projects last week, and I gave an overview of those in the budget message. So a lot of that is captured in using our SDC funds. Eric, just a little quick kind of a point here. So we sent out some updated worksheets, and so when we're looking at what we've got on the screen, we're using the most up-to-date. So in case there's any confusion, if you're looking at what we originally sent versus the updated, Eric's going to reference anything that's on the more up-to-date worksheet. So,
Which is what we're looking at up here.
Anything else on that one, Eric?
No.
Any questions for staff on this? Okay. Then we'll move into the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund, one of our favorite topics here at the Budget Committee.
Okay, the Cemetery Perpetual Care Fund provides for future care of the Zion Memorial Park Cemetery once operational revenues from sales and activities cease. So let's see, FY '22 budget, total resources was 1.65 million. We're proposing 1.68 million, so it's pretty much same as last year. The requirements, same thing. The biggest thing that happens there is the $500,000 interfund transfer between the library. That's just a timing issue of when the library gets their funds from Clackamas County. So this fund, the Cemetery Perpetual Fund, is basically loaning the library $500,000 until they get their funding from the county, and then it's paid back. So essentially the same as last year. Any questions?
Questions on the cemetery fund? Yes, Councilor Marine.
So Zion is the only cemetery in the city that we own or that we budget for. Is that correct? What about Baker Prairie?
do you want to come up, Jerry? It's,
It's an animal question. Nice.
That is correct, that we budget for. The other cemetery, it escapes me on Knight's Bridge, is usually donated time, stuff like that. We have done a little bit of work, like some signs and stuff like that, and I believe in the past we budgeted for that.
Jerry, I actually think I saw Parks mowing there today, so who pays for that?
They do maintenance there on that, so, that I'd have to look into that, where that's, tracked and come from, but I do know that it's covered on there, so, thanks, Tracy. There's a lot of little places around town that they do stuff, but they do track it well.
Any other questions?
Just one other general comment. I don't recall if I said this last week, but last week we talked about the cemetery operational fund, which also is kind of part of our parks budget. This is the fund that sort of helps to supplement that. We talked about, I want to just reiterate this one more time. If I did say this, I think I did, but we talked about last year at the budget committee, there were questions about evaluating where we're at in terms of the how self-sufficient our cemetery operations are or are not. And we did not have time, given the staff turnover that we've discussed, to do that for this year's process. But I just wanted to let you know that we would intend to dig into that further and bring back some better discussion about that next budget cycle, or again, maybe a part of our one of those mid-year budget discussions.
Excuse me, mid-cookie chew. All right, we'll move into the forfeiture fund.
Okay, the forfeiture fund exists to accumulate and account for assets received by the police department as a result of federal and civil drug forfeitures. Let's see, proceeds can only be used for drug enforcement and equipment. If additional funds are obtained during the course of the year, a supplemental budget would be required to appropriate the funds. Okay, so last year, our FY22 budget, the amount of revenue was predicted to only be $175. We're projecting $10,175 this year. I've got these numbers from George Tro. Materials and services will be roughly the same. FY22 was 12,000. FY23 at 10,000. So pretty close to previous year with materials and services. Any questions?
Eric, the projected difference or the swing in being such a change is, do we know what?
I could try it if you want. So currently, one of the task forces that we loan an officer to that does a lot of drug busts and things like that that would get some of these funds. We are currently, actually Jose is currently negotiating with the county to try to actually capture a little bit more percentage, like a proportional percentage for all of the people who are on that team. And so we're hopeful that that's gonna be, it seems to be amicable, so we're assuming that we will get a bigger portion or any portion at all of this one particular team that we have an active presence on.
Okay.
Yeah.
And if those negotiations fail? And if those negotiations fail, where are we?
Well, we participate in a couple of different ways in which, like, if we have a drug bust here, or there's some sort of, if there's cash involved with that, we go through a forfeiture process and we actually get that. So I assume some of this is prognosticating a level of interdiction and success in that, right? But I'm just aware of trying to get a bigger proportionality of one of the teams that we're on.
Okay.
Okay. Any other questions regarding this fund? All right, we'll move into the facilities fund.
Okay, so for the facilities fund, let's see, the facility fund provides for the maintenance and repair of all the city-owned structures. FY22 highlights include a commercial-sized generator and automatic transfer switch at Public Works. FY23 goals, some of them are upgrade the gutters, HVAC, and insulation at Public Works warehouses. The other thing that's happening in the facilities fund is there was a contracted janitorial service, but now we're gonna have staff janitorial service, so there's an increase there. So if we look at the revenue, revenue FY22 was $348,940. For the proposed is $497,730. The internal revenue facilities is all the other funds' contribution to cover the costs of the facilities fund. So if we look at personnel services, you can see the big difference there. In FY22, it was where is it? 155,000, and proposed this year is 297. And that's, you can look at the FTEs also going from 1.1 to 3.5. So that's adding 2.4 FTE to that. Materials and services in FY22 was 207,684. Proposed is 176,526. The reduction is the reduction in the contract services. And so that's what I've got. Jerry, you want to say anything about facilities?
Well, I'll just, let me kind of start, and then Jerry, fill in if you would. I wanted to note, Eric addressed the change in the FTE. So last year, we actually added a custodial position in-house. That's the current custodial, or that's the current part of the current facility line. It looks as though we're adding 2 new positions. What we're actually doing is we are adding, and I did mention this last week, we're adding an additional custodian because as we went away from our contracted service, we've been kind of analyzing how much custodial service we actually need. We needed to add 1 more custodian, so that's a total of 2. But the other difference is why it's going from 1.3 to 3.5 is Jerry's doing some internal reorganization within the facilities operation, and Dustin Breeze, who is our facilities person, our coordinator, is going to, we're making that position that he's in essentially a lead over the whole facilities. It's just basically a streamlining and making better use of our existing staff. So it looks like 2 new staff, but it's 1 new staff and 1 existing staff that's kind of moving over through an internal reorg, just to clarify. Is there anything else about that, Jerry?
Can I make one
Yeah.
comment? Thank you, Counselor Spoon, for pointing this one out, but on page 90, there is a line that talks about actual, in what says number of OSHA or safety violations reported. We were complained about in one way, and so we did some mitigation in terms of masking, and so I will make a correction that says number 1 and the actuals on that for the final document.
Any questions or comments on the facilities fund? Okay. Fleet Services Fund on page 92.
Services. The Fleet Service Department's goal is to provide exceptional service and support to all city departments, keeping all city-owned vehicles and equipment safe and in good working condition. 22 highlights.
It's a lie.
What's that?
That's not. Go ahead.
Okay, don't be funny.
No, not me.
FY 22 highlights include sent 1 vehicle and miscellaneous shopped items to auction, hired a new mechanic. Some of the FY 2023 goals are to sell more low usage vehicles and equipment. Let's see, if we look at the revenue for fleet, FY 22 budgeted was 831,617. FY 23 proposed is 829,158. Very similar numbers there. In personnel services, FY 22 was 276. FY 23 is 289,000. So again, very similar numbers. Under materials and services for FY 22 is 386,880. FY 23 proposed is 577,226. Some of the things that are bumping that up are the Canby area transit expense, all of the overhead charges, which are the internal charges, and then the big one is gas and fuel. FY 22 capital outlay was at 175,000, and this year it's just 15,000. Todd?
I apologize. It was brought to my attention that my brain is not keeping up with time, and that our new mechanic has actually been here 1.5 years. So I was thinking we had just hired him last year, and he's actually been, we lost the mechanic and we had to replace the mechanic with the mechanic, but actually he's been here 1.5 years. So I apologize, we didn't actually hire a new mechanic this fiscal year, so that's my error.
That's what you were telling me.
That's what I was telling you, don't read that part. As Eric was saying, the line item is pretty similar to last year, which if you think about it, it's pretty impressive. We have well over 80 vehicles and we only have 2 mechanics. And our 2 mechanics keep the entire city's fleet. That's all our police, all our transit, all our public works running all the time. And most people don't even notice they exist. And they're doing a great job of it. We have probably the 2 best mechanics any city can ask for. They're doing a fantastic job. But we are grappling with rising fuel costs, and we're grappling with rising parts costs, and we're grappling with parts availability. We took our best stab at fuel. We're now well into the mid-5s for diesel, so I'm not sure that's gonna cut it. But it's so unpredictable, I can't tell you for sure that that's really gonna work. We'll just have to go with it and hope we can, hope it goes the other way.
Well, as with, I think, most budgeting, it is not a perfect science. It is oftentimes a best guess. And the tea leaves have been known to be wrong, and both good and bad. And I think this is one of those where we've done our best aiming at the target, and we'll probably have to adjust, I'm sure, as the year goes on, as we move into the next budget year. So I commend you and the transit team on all that you guys have accomplished. You've had a busy year, and a lot of planning is starting to come to fruition. So we don't see you very often, and so thank you for being here. And I just want to tell you the transit team is doing a really good job, so thank you. Council President Hensley.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'm just wondering, with the rising cost of gas, and we don't see an end in sight anytime soon, has there been any discussions about raising the fares a little bit?
So there has not been any discussion about raising the fares. We charge $1 for our 99X and for our dial rate service. And I know it would help cover fuel, but we've also seen a pretty decent increase in businesses in Canby. So while Canby Area Transit's costs have gone up, so has the incoming payroll tax. So it's kind of been a bit of a wash. And I would hate personally to increase the cost of fares when most people are struggling to buy groceries right now. Because most of the people that ride the bus service are the people who most need the bus service. And thus, even a little bit of increase in fares may not seem a lot to me, but to somebody who finds that dollar hard to come by, I'd be more inclined to go the opposite direction, to be honest with you, just to help people out. So.
And I know that we do see also a dip in ridership when we bump fare rates. So yeah. Yes, Mr. Maldonado.
So on the tires alone, I'm assuming that you guys do have a contract with business for those. Mm-hmm. And who's that contract with?
We use Alars down here.
Alars, okay. And who is it that does the vehicle maintenance?
As far as
any types of repairs that may need to happen, or any standardized maintenance for them?
Our mechanics do all that work.
Everything's in-house?
Most everything's in-house. They do a cost-benefit analysis when it comes to the larger things.
Okay.
Like some of our bus transmissions are huge, and they take multiple days. So if they're looking down the barrel of a bus transmission, they will send it out because a shop can do it faster while they work on other vehicles. So.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilor Spoon.
Yeah, in last week's budget, when we were going through public works and whatnot, we looked at budget for a fueling station. And so I assume Fleet will be using that fueling station when it exists. And do we anticipate that will mitigate some of the rising fuel costs when we can fuel internally?
We use a state contract for fuel, so I don't know that it will do much for us. Transit wasn't going to use the fueling station because the fueling station would be at the Public Works Department, and it's actually a longer drive for us to get our buses over there than it is to take our buses down to Carson's. So there isn't a massive benefit there for us. And generally, you're still paying that whoever's supplying or filling your fuel station, you're still paying their markup. So if Carson's is filling our station, then we're still paying the same markup as opposed to just using their pumps.
Okay, but I assume we'll do some sort of internal costing on that when we have actual fuel prices.
Yeah, we'll that's going to be a new thing for us. So it's for convenience and potentially, the better pricing if we were kind of buying in bulk. to do, as Todd said, a lot of our transit vehicles, because they're kind of out and about in different parts of town, but our public works and those vehicles would use that. But also a justification for that fuel station, just so everybody's aware, is also for emergency, having a stock of emergency fuel on hand. So like when we had the ice storm, we had a pretty difficult time getting fuel into some of our key critical areas. So it's for that purpose as well. But yes, we will be doing some ongoing analysis.
Yeah, I know that Todd spoke to transit, but fleet covers all city vehicles, right? So in theory, not every some city vehicles are housed at Public Works where the fueling station would be. Okay.
Most of the other vehicles will be using the fueling station, and there's where you're gonna see your benefit, because they're not having to run all the way to Carson's to get their fuel. So all of our Public Works vehicles are wastewater vehicles, they'll use that station. The biggest benefit will be in an emergency situation, because we hopefully won't run out of fuel, because we'll have emergency reserves available. That's where our largest benefit will be. We also have an opportunity, and I know Jerry's looking into this, to look at, I believe it's called renewable diesel, which is it's not a biodiesel. It's actually, it burns much cleaner than regular diesel. And if this works out, we were going to partnership with some of the cities around us to buy in bulk renewable diesel, and that could bring our costs down. And they burn much cleaner than regular diesel. So he's looking into that to see if that's a benefit.
Do we know when the fueling station will exist, Jerry?
Yeah, currently I have the RFQ for engineering, almost complete. I just gotta.
Yeah. People can't hear.
I'm just thinking ahead to future budgets and when we can see that cost savings on fuel or its relation to the budget.
I completed the RFQ. I just want to have Joe Lindsay review it, and I want to advertise for engineering, because we have some money in this year's budget to get started, and then get going on this and have this complete in this next budget cycle. It's our plan.
Awesome.
I was told though that tanks are right now a year to build. That's why I want to get going on it. So it's going to be right around a year once we get started.
Cool. Thank you.
Yep.
And also just to note on that, part of the impetus for that is we have an aging fuel tank that's sitting on the property now that needs to be replaced, should have been replaced years ago. And we were originally going to just put another tank in. And they said, well, what if we do a fuel station that can hold a lot more fuels, especially after that storm where we ran out.
Perfect. Councilor Parker.
Todd, I would like, by next year's budget meeting, if maybe sooner if we have some interim budget committee meetings, but I would like to see your analysis on potential savings in this budget if we move to some electric vehicles and the feasibility of it. So I know every year that's changing, and so it would be, especially with us paying, what is it, about $9,000 a month more in your projected budget for gasoline, that it might behoove us to move that way. I know that Public Works is putting in some charging stations, and if there's some initial upfront costs on this, I know as a budget member, I would certainly welcome a review of that.
Okay. Can do.
Great. Any other questions or comments for fleet at this point? Okay. Todd, thank you. Next up is Tech Services Fund.
Tech Services Fund. The computer system represents the basic infrastructure for all office operations and is fundamental to efficient staff performance. Some of the 22 highlights are moved to the transit network to the city network. And I don't know what this means exactly, but I'm going to read it. Replaced current police department Veeam server backup repository and achieved approximately 98% server uptime. Some of the FY 2023 goals are to implement Microsoft 365 and Teams, replace server host 1, and the big one is transition to in-house IT services. So if we look at tech services resources for FY 22, the revenue in tech was $408,592. we're proposing it would be 748,250. Again, we see the internal revenue tech services of 748,000. That's every other department's contribution to the tech services fund to cover all of the expenditures. So you can see that that's a large increase this year. They need more revenue because they're gonna have more expenses that we're gonna look at here. So in personnel services for 22, we're at 132,000 and 1.1 FTE for proposed FY 2023. It's going to 365,605 with 2.5 FTE. Because we're bringing the in-house services in, the contract service will be less. So if we're looking at materials and services, that first line of technical consultant, that's what it is. And you see the decrease there. At the bottom, you can see computer equipment. For FY 22, that was, whoops, it's about the same. Sorry, I was looking at the wrong thing. So for total materials and services for FY 22 is 298,452. This year, FY 23 proposed, it decreases slightly to 267,967. The capital outlay in 22 was budgeted at 0, and this year, or proposing for 23, is 157,000. So those are the big changes in tech services.
And in this, just to add a couple of comments here, we're pretty significantly changing how we do this internal service for the city. And actually, Joe, do you want to kind of give a little overview of that? Again, Danny Smith, our library director and IT director, was unable to attend either of our budget meetings. So Joe's going to kind of fill in for him and give his speech in his absence.
I will. So these numbers here were generated through a process using, I know Ken Tech and Valerie Kraxberger and Danny coming together and trying to do their best estimation of what they knew was going to be a transition from using contracted service primarily with an IT coordinator into having two internal in-house full-time, one network administrator, one technician. And so we didn't know what, at the time right before publication here, we did not know whether or not the hiring that we were doing was going to be successful or not in terms of those two positions. We have now successfully hired both of those positions. One person's been on for almost a month, and the other one just showed up yesterday. So we now have better information using the higher end expert that says that we won't really be needing the services of the consultant. So that top number, 82,000, is incredibly inflated. And we can make a note of that. One of the problems with changing publication was that the way we generated these hundreds and hundreds of pages was using the excellent services of Melissa Bissett, because she's advanced in the PDF realm and making packets. And it took her the greater portion of several days to put this together. And because tech is overhead for every single department, it would have changed every PDF, and it would have had to have been inserted, and it would have been the meanest thing possible, just from a work standpoint. So instead of the soonest we could assuredly say this, really beyond just being yesterday, because our second person passed background and actually showed up to work and was bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, was that we got more and more assurances from our now tech expert, as he's been kicking the tires and looking under the hood, that we indeed will be able to go consultant-free much more sooner than later. And now the target date of the complete handover is the end of their current contract at the end of June. And so that number should be close to 0. There are a few expenses along the way, because we did have a separate lease for firewall services. And so there'll be a little bit of costs in kind of buying out that final year of that. I believe it's about $7,000. So that's what I would suggest that actual number be, is somewhere around $7,200. Other than that, this again was based, and I'm really glad that the mayor had his speech about the guesswork of budgeting, because this indeed was guesswork, and it's stale guesswork. But what we're excited to report is we will be very much transitioning into what we think will be closer to spending closer to the same amount of money that we were using a consultant-free situation with 2 in-house folks. So that's I guess my apologies on behalf of Danny and the budget itself, but that we're doing our best in real time to try to make sure that we're gonna save money. This budget doesn't have to be spent, so that line, even if it were passed, if it's not spent, could go back into the general fund.
Question, so, okay, just help me understand this. So even if that 82,000 is at 0, we're still, I don't know how we're spending the same amount as we spent with the consultant, because we're still $100,000 over. So that, I mean, $100,000 isn't close to the same. My question then also is, what additional services are we getting by having internal IT for an additional $100,000 than having the consultant company, which, full disclosure, I'm friends with the owner of the company, so I'm just curious. We had 20 years of institutional knowledge with the previous company that we don't gain for this additional $100,000. So help me understand the reasons why we're bringing it in-house and spending another $100,000.
Well, part of this, and we currently have 3 IT folks, and one of the positions was primarily to coordinate the relationship between the consultant and the city. So that is being phased out as well. So part of the savings will be the reduction in that over time. That's why you're seeing a 2.5.
But we don't see any savings. We're increasing by 100,000. So that's I want to know what we're getting for an additional 125. I'm okay with it.
Yeah.
I'm just wondering, what are we getting for an additional $125,000 that we were not getting before? Because I want to know why we're spending that $125,000. I'm okay with spending it. I'm just wondering, what additional things are we getting now that we did not get with the consultant?
Well, let me start with how we got here, because last year, the budget committee recognized that we had a long-standing contract with one individual consultant. And I understand that the marching orders basically were to go out for an RFP or figure out how to do this differently. So the RFP was, I would say, arguably bound to be an increase as well. So just so it's not an apples to apples, you know what I mean? It's a bit of an apples to oranges, because we don't know what that RFP would have produced in terms of actual cost today. But that being said, we believe that the costs of this would have gone up somewhat anyway. But what we're getting is 2 experts that we have better control of over, because they're employees, they're not contractors. And so when you have a contractor, you hire them to do the contract, but there's a division under law that is, if you have a contractor, you cannot direct their work. They're hired to do the contract, and then that's what they do. And so ostensibly, one of the things that we're getting is we're building towards a future. We'll have people that we can control their work, and one of them is a confidential employee, and so you can actually have a better relationship with that person and have a more honest interaction about what the needs are of the city and where we're going, and get you can demand better answers out of them. So those are some of the costs. I know they're soft, but those are some of the real kind of advantages that you get when you have in-house folks.
Okay. So the additional is just for control, to be able to have a little more oversight of what.
Well, and longevity, because the other thing that you get is if you have somebody in-house, right, you end up with somebody who has a vested interest in being a member of the team, working together to kind of find efficiencies. We believe we've found some already. We believe on some of these extra licensings and some of the ways in which we were doing, there was a way in which we were doing a lot of our telework that actually, we believe it amounted more to somewhere around $25,000. And we've already now negotiated using one of our new people, and it's going to cost about $7,900 for what was costing us $25,000. So we will find efficiencies and we will get that number down. And we're also transitioning out of 2.5 people down to 2, but that's going to take this year to really square away. So I know that takes some faith when you're changing a whole system over to go, how much can we actually reliably save? But in the long run, we are hopeful that we are going to actually create a system that we don't have to pay for all these other kind of, what do you call them, cafeteria type service, and that we can actually truly create a system of our own that we have more control over, and that it's in-house people that, there is a decent amount of all of our stuff is on these. And so it is actually super helpful in the realm of confidentiality to actually have in-house folks in this arena. And that's, I guess, the most that I can say at this point.
Yeah, I appreciate that answer, and thanks for explaining that. Especially if we can see some savings on other stuff as well, I think that's great. And I would love if maybe some of the homework that we could do on our mid-year budget meeting is try and refine this number a little bit more.
Sure.
Now that we've got both people on, to try and figure out what that difference really is. And then if we can maybe get a list of like what those things are, where we are going to find some more efficiencies and where we could save, I think that just helps eat that number a little bit better. It just seems like a big increase, and so I just wanted to make sure that we're getting some value in that increase. Again, like I said, not opposed to it, but just wanted to make sure we're getting the value.
We can make sure that Danny Smith gets a constant kind of, as this goes along, because we're finding efficiencies as we go, that we can make a nice list and actually produce it for you guys so that you'll get to see it more sooner than later.
Yeah, that'd be wonderful. And I think even with some of the other departments where we're bringing in-house versus contract, I think that would be, because obviously in-house can be more expensive sometimes than contract. And so to be able to see that difference, and where those efficiencies come, because it's, when you look at, one number to one number, it might look like a big difference, but if we can say, here's what we saved by doing this as well, it helps balance that out a little bit. So I appreciate the explanation.
And we will get continuity of service, and we will get, it's kind of like owning a house. You can kind of control the growth in your expenses, right? Because if you are dealing with a contractor, and I know Todd's in the room, he's had to do this, go out for RFP, and you get a new contractor, and suddenly your contract goes up $200,000. I know that happened for CAT. So sometimes having in-house, you at least control it. You basically know the COLAs that are coming down the pike. So that's another benefit.
Wonderful. Thanks for the explanation. Appreciate it.
Best way Joe, if I can just see this is we're switching, so there's that upfront cost of now bringing that business in-house, and that we would potentially, or the goal is to see savings in subsequent budget years.
Yeah.
Okay. Did you have a question?
I do. I'll be honest, I'm not sold. With the costs of insurance that only increase every year, and we also have PERS contributions, which we don't have to pay for with a contracted consultant, we're looking at a $265,000 increase in personnel services, and only at best, you're saying maybe it's 8,000, not 82,000. So we're looking at still 132,000 is all we're saving. So we're spending a lot more for these services For control, have we not had control over the contractor? Have we had issues that I wasn't aware of? Longevity, we've had this contractor for many, many years, which is why this was brought up in the last budget meeting. But yet we didn't do an RFP. And Matt, did I hear you right? We did not bother to go and do an RFP to see what the services would be?
No, we opted for going in-house.
Okay, so we don't know. That, I mean, if you look at the past budget years with the consultant, it hasn't increased very much each year. But with COLA raises, insurance costs, the cost of an in-house employee is gonna go up every year. So I'm not seeing the benefit of this decision. And and continuity of service, I think we've had continuity of service. We've had this contractor for many, many years. And I don't disagree that we should have gone out for an RFP to see if we were truly getting the best price out there. They might have come in with the best price again and we would have recontracted with them. I really am disappointed that we didn't go and do an RFP and we made this decision to spend this much more money when I really don't see a benefit for it. Pardon?
Wasn't there a direction?
I thought that there was, but I'd have to look back at the notes. And second question, I guess, related, you've said these 2 people have already been hired. So they're already on staff right now, June of 2022. How was that budgeted? It wasn't allowed in the last budget. So where did that money come from to fund them until the next budget year, which doesn't start till next month or July?
We use our existing budget, and I think we did have some conversation with the council about this, but my authority allows to expend within the adopted budget, and in the process of reviewing this, we chose to move forward as kind of a mid-year. It was my decision ultimately, so I'll just say it that way. That's the easiest way to say it. But we had the budget authority to do it. We were moving this direction. And I think also to kind of answer your prior question a little bit as well, and probably Councilor Barwick's too, is part of this as well. And in addition to what Joe was explaining, so here's part of kind of where it all went. We had some conversation at the budget committee last year about we're probably overdue to review that we've got this long-term contract, and have we reviewed that? And it had been a long time since we'd either gone out to bid or reviewed how we provided that service. We had a transition of the director that was overseeing our IT services formerly was our finance director, who is no longer with the city. Actually, Joe was very briefly kind of overseeing our IT while we had another transition, and then eventually in the current budget year, I reassigned IT. It's kind of one of those. It's not a full-time director position. We're not quite big enough. Some cities have their own full-time IT director, but really don't think we have that justification at this point. Danny Smith, who was our current library director, is our current library director, has some background and some skill set, and is savvy in this area. And I actually ended up reassigning because of the departure of the former director, who this was a secondary part of their job. I assigned it to Danny. I asked him to, based on conversations that we'd had, I essentially asked Danny to do a full analysis of our IT system and figure out best practices. He met with peer cities of ours in the region, a number of our neighboring cities, and kind of our peers that we talk with about comparative services have a similar system that we are proposing and that we're moving to, where essentially this is a something that I think is a common practice, the way that we're proposing to set up our IT services. So there was that too. We essentially did a comprehensive analysis of our IT services. We thought it's our recommendation that this, as a best practice, we think will best suit the city going forward, not just in this 1 year. This 1 year snapshot next year is going to be a little bit of a blip, and as we transition kind of through this, the cost will spike a bit And then, as Joe was describing, it will settle back out. But what we really believe is this is going to be better for the city in the long term for a number of the reasons that were discussed, and that it ultimately gives us the full 100% control of our own services, and we do believe that it's going to serve the city better. It's not a perfect, just as we discussed, budgeting isn't a perfect scientific experiment, but it's our best guessing, and we do believe, based on our information, that this is the best thing for the city going forward.
Counselor Spoon, and then I'll come over to you, Jack.
Yeah, I have some comments, but before that, a question. Do you know, can you estimate how many hours a week we were billed for with our contractor?
So the contract with our contractor gave us, it was supposed to be an average of 56 hours per week.
Okay. And do you know is that what we came to with them? I know that we had some one-offs with them.
Well, I'll just say, the contract, I guess, looked to have the 56 hours per week. I'm not always confident that you would see, more than one body in a given area. There is, the contractor did have some work, I guess, that they would do off-site. But I mean, anecdotally, I would try to figure out with the police how many hours on average they thought they needed somebody out there. And they thought sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, but oftentimes it was closer to about 12 hours.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm
That
not sure
helps.
we're getting 56 hours.
Okay. I think that's part of what I'm thinking, is that basically we're going from 1.1 FTE to 2.5. That's an additional 56 hours a week of technical support. And if everyone remembers, we've increased some of our technical requirements. We're doing body cams now with the police. And it's not like our technical needs, the cost of the contractor would stay the same. You can't add body cams and expect someone to turn all that data over and not have an increase in expense with a contractor. We've increased the technical needs, not to even account for the state law has changed. Now we're required certain remote accesses that we weren't required before. I actually think our technical needs have gone up enough that it makes perfect sense to bring tech in-house. There will be an initial expense, but over time, we're going to create that institutional knowledge. The idea that the contractors that come to the city have institutional knowledge, I don't think is accurate either. In my experience with contractors, oftentimes they have turnover too. So to assume that the contractor that's coming to serve the city is the same one that's been coming year after year to the city, I think is an inaccuracy as well. Just because the person that owns the company is the same doesn't mean the person that is doing the work is the same. And so also I would say, we did have an executive session to discuss some of this. I won't talk about it now because that would be inappropriate, but if we need to have another executive session, maybe that's what we should do, because we're having conversations that allude to things that we shouldn't, really be talking about. But if we need to have another executive session, maybe we should do that. But I think that this makes perfect sense.
Jack.
Okay, I've got two very serious concerns about the direction you're going here. And this is what I did back when I had a job before I retired. Number one is the nature of the labor market here. If these guys are young and bright, you're either going to be giving them big raises or somebody else is going to be giving them big raises. They don't stay, they move around. I lost several people simply because our company could not pay what they could get out there on the market. And it happens. So the term institutional memory has a little bit different meaning here than it does in most other situations. The other concern I've got is security. I mean, the federal government was hacked. I think they have a little bit more resources than we do. And I am very concerned that with 2.5 people, we're going to be able to deal with the security issues. I'm aware of at least one Oregon city, they're a little bit smaller in Canby, but that was held up for ransomware.
Yeah.
So security, and so when you say going zero contractor, I have some real concerns about that. You need to have some security people come in and look at it. So I don't think that that's a valid goal to go zero security. I think you're going to need to do a zero contractor. I think you're going to still be calling in contractors.
Okay. I appreciate those comments. The part of what we're trying to do is set up pretty much the same firewall system, use the same antivirus software and malware and spam software. And then what we also have is through CIS, we actually have liability insurance for cyber, which is what happens when those towns are attacked and somebody opens up something they shouldn't. But what we can also have is, a staff that reminds everybody, don't open up attachments that you don't know who they came from. You know what I mean? So there are different levels of practices, I believe, that kind of can enhance your security in the same or even better ways than somebody who is just hired to keep the servers running.
Anything else, Jack?
No, I think the direction's already set. I'm just saying, those are two issues that you're going to need to deal with in the future.
And I do appreciate that. The other thing about the nature of this is this is the direction that the city is going. It doesn't mean that it has to go that way forever, right? We might have a council in the future that directs us to, go out and do it differently or go back to the way it was.
Council President Hensley.
To that piece, I would prefer to go out for RFP and get all of the information now rather than get a year or two down the road and decide that wasn't the way to go and then have to fire people.
Any other comments or questions for staff on this one? Do we need to put a pin in this and come back to it, or is this?
I still don't like it, so I don't know what you want to do with that.
Okay.
Jack, can I ask you a question? Because I'm trying to understand. Are you asking that is it that we think that the current contractor handles security well, and so we don't want to go away from that? Or is it that you think we should spend more money to reinforce our internet or our technical security?
That's what you need the expert contractor to tell you. Yeah, I can't tell you, but that's what you do need the expert to tell you is how secure are you now and how much more do you need to spend?
We did hire somebody that has set up multiple businesses who is an expert in network administration with a whole career of service as well. I mean, we can't really get into personnel evaluations in this venue, so.
Mr. Mayor, I don't know that putting a pin in it is actually going to do us any good because my whole point is moot since the people have already been hired. So to change direction, we would be doing what I was fearing and we'd have to fire people. So it sounds like the train's already left the station regardless of what we all feel about it.
Okay. Anything else on tech services then at this point? Nope. Okay. Then we'll move into the sewer combined fund.
Brian, at 7:30, did you want to have a break or did you want to move forward?
Thank you. It is 7:30. Thank you. Appreciate that. We do have this one section left. Do we want to take a break or do we want to power through?
Well, let's go ahead and take a break.
Okay.
We have discussion ahead and we've got the procedure.
Okay. Then let's take a 8-minute break and we'll 8 minutes.
Joe? Specific?
You guys. Okay, thank you, Canby, for indulging us in a quick break. We're gonna continue on with our city budget conversation and move into the sewer combined fund. And I believe that Eric and Jerry are gonna take us through all that fun stuff.
All right, the sewer combined fund. The purpose of the sewer combined fund is to facilitate protection of the environment and public health in the wastewater arena. So if we're looking at the revenues, the FY 22 revenues were 4.46 million, and it's roughly the same for FY 2023. Slight increase in the utility charges for service. In the transfers in, there's going to be a large transfer in from the SDC fund for projects that we'll look at a bit later. Could you scroll down to the wastewater? Keep going. Go down one more. One more. Right there. Okay, so for the requirements for the wastewater treatment plant, FY 22 personnel was 818,798. Proposed for 2023 is 955,173. That's due to just increases and an FTE increase as well. Materials and services, FY 22 was 554,000. Proposed for 2023, 547,000, which is very similar. Capital outlay for 22 was 31,000. Proposed for 23 is 981,000. The two big capital projects are the equipment storage and maintenance building and the pre-sate storage basin improvements. Want to say anything about this before I move on?
No, just the Crescent storage basin improvements is just upgrading the maintenance, just keeping it from leaking. And
Good reason.
And the equipment storage, we have equipment outside and we want to house it inside, so that's what that is.
Anyone have any questions about any of that?
Doesn't appear to be that way.
Okay, let's move on to collections. Okay, so personnel and collections for 22 was 316,583. Proposed for 23 is 407,543. Slight increase in FTE there is just for reallocating some current employees. For materials and services for FY 22 was just under 138,000. Proposed for 2023 is just under 128,000, so a slight decrease. In the capital outlay for 22, it was 1,535,000. Proposed for 2023 is 1,415,000. You can look at the capital projects there. Any questions on that? Jerry, you want to say anything?
We're gonna upgrade a service truck. They're doing $100,000 towards the fuel station, and then we're eliminating the South Safeway pump station. It's currently behind Safeway, and to get to the controls of it, we actually have to go into one of the businesses, and so by removing this, reversing lines, we'll be running gravity in the sewer down to the 3rd and Baker pump station, and we'll be installing a generator on that also.
Let me back up and just say that in the collections department, the 22 highlights were that they cleaned 11.3 miles of sanitary main lines and completed annual inspections at Canby businesses to ensure fat, oil, and grease, also known as the FOG program, were in compliance. 2023 goals are to remove the Safeway pump station, like Jerry just said, and to increase the public awareness of the FOG program, the Fat Oil and Grease program. Okay, the Stormwater Department maintains the city's stormwater management safely. The 22 highlights were they performed a monthly street sweeping, installed 14 new dry wells, cleaned 6 dry wells, and mapped with GIS 10% of the city's storm system. 23 goals, some of them are to update the storm water master plan and to map out 50% of the city's stormwater infrastructure. Can we scroll down to stormwater? Okay, so stormwater, the FY22 budget, personnel services was 155,000. Proposed for 23 is 255,000. Adding FTE there. In materials and services for 22, it was a little over 68,000, and proposed for 23 is just under 77,000. So pretty similar number, a slight increase. Capital outlay for 22, there was none, and proposed for 23 is 274,000. Want to talk about?
Yeah, again, a few small capital projects. We adding some dry wells into some areas that are flooding around town, and the fuel station, and updating a pickup for stormwater.
And by updating, you mean buying a new one?
Buying a new pickup.
So we're
yes.
moving away from our 1976 and 77 vehicle?
We're keeping the 1975. We won't let that go.
Okay.
But the rest of them we're gonna part with.
Okay, so we're not, again, I'm gonna look at our fleet team, they're able to maintain that 75 Ford that's still running?
It's a 4-speed manual with a 306 in it. It'll run forever.
Perfect. Duct tape and baling twine, here we go.
The cab's getting a little rough.
Just put in a new seat.
I think we did get a new seat. It's nice. The seat is nice.
So much for rack and pinion steering.
There we go.
All right.
And just to finish off the sewer combined fund, we have the requirements that are not allocated to one of the specific 3 departments we just looked at. So personnel services for FY 2022 was just over 33,000. Proposed for 23 is just under 30,000, so a slight decrease. Materials and services, FY 22 was just under 355,000. I'm proposing for 23 is 356,000, so pretty much the same. Transfers out is very similar as well, with FY 22 being just under 337,000, and proposed for FY 22 budget was just under 337,000, and the FY 23 proposed is just over 349,000.
Question regarding this one, and one of the fun things about, I think, being on the city budget committee is after 12 years, still learning new things in this process. What falls in the sewer combined fund that's not allocated? Is this, like, what's in here?
Let's see. Well, under materials and services, there's sewer billing, which I don't know why I can't answer that question very accurately right now.
Okay.
I'm not familiar enough with these specific accounts.
Okay. I mean, I get what the line item states, but I'm just curious as to what makes it, not necessarily allocated.
Right.
So
when I'm working on this, I have like a personnel sheet that lists every person that's in there, and then I talk to Jerry and the department heads, and they allocate percentages for each one into each department. And in unallocated, it's like 1% maybe for a few employees, and so some of their costs get allocated there. Can you answer why it's in the unallocated?
That's what I was trying to, I wouldn't I think I could, but I'm not clear on it. I'd hate to say something that's false.
So, perfect, yeah, as Councilor Parker just said, yeah, for next year's fine. It was just, like I said, things that pop out as we go through this year after year, so you don't have an answer, totally fine.
I'm happy to research it and figure it out and
No rush, so,
send out a
yeah,
email.
it was just one of those, out of curiosity.
It's one of those, it's been historically budgeted in this way, and there obviously are some of the costs that don't get allocated directly to some of the other funds, but we'd be happy to do a bit more research there. At least for the purposes of this year, we could let you know it maybe after the fact when you recommend the budget, but we can certainly.
There's a lot on the to-do list. This is not one of those that I would say is a top 30 item, so.
We appreciate that.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Like I said, it was more out of my morbid curiosity of city budgeting than anything else. All right, that concludes our fund review. Eric, is there anything else that we should know or that we didn't ask that we should have asked?
Not that I can think of, no.
Okay. Yes, Counselor Spoon.
I just had a question about about the first appendix. When we're looking at the FTE comparison to prior years, one of the numbers I don't love seeing, no one's gonna be surprised, is that this is the lowest FTE allocation we've had for parks in 5 years.
Did you say in parks?
Yeah.
Let's see.
It's page 104.
It's the first appendix on FTE allocations.
Yep, right here. Is this
And thank you,
104?
Counselor Spoon, for bringing that up.
Right here. Do we have a mistake?
one is actually different, it's the same as the last 2 years. Are you looking at the revised packet that we have?
No.
I don't have the
It's
revised packet.
it's
I have the old
one that
ones.
was dished out.
5 on page 104, but in the revised version it's 6.3, which has been adjusted at sidewalks.
Okay. Is there any look forward to increasing that? I mean, that was kind of, I know that there's a discrepancy in opinion about what the parks fee was for initially, but I was hoping that in time we would increase our parks staff.
Let me take a shot at that one, Jerry. We had some conversation, Jerry and Jeff Snyder, our parks lead, about whether we would bring forward any new requests this year or in future years. And what we decided to do was we added a little bit of seasonal time this year, I think, in this coming up budget, just to account for a bit more of the workload. And then given that our Parks Master Plan is just in the process of being completed, we're looking at potentially adding some new amenities. We've talked about a few of those things over the last couple of budget meetings here. What I anticipate is bringing some of those requests forward to you in beginning next year and in subsequent budget years, and really looking at, I think our Parks Master Plan is going to give us good guidance on where we're headed and what types of future maintenance needs we're going to have. But our maintenance demands, while I want to give full credit, our parks crew works very hard and they do a great job, and they have a lot to keep up with currently, and we've kind of remained static. But we're really not as of right now and really into the better part of this next budget year, we're not really increasing until we start actually bringing on some of these new amenities and new facilities. So as we do that, we're definitely going to be looking ahead. And that does tie into our discussion about what we need to do with the parks fee and whether we want to extend that, because it does sunset next year. So we'll have that conversation.
And then in addition to that, and where are we housing, is HR and risk management, is that where we put tech? Where did we put our tech services increase in FTEs? Because administration went down, so I'm assuming it's not there.
It's under tech services.
Oh, I see, it's down on the bottom, not in general fund, and, okay, yeah, because it's a separate fund. Okay, awesome, thanks.
Yeah, to follow up on that too, Counselor Spoon, so at the last Parks Board meeting, that was one of the conversations that came up when it was Jerry and Jeff, Public Works Director and our Park Supervisor did give a breakdown on the staffing piece, and because that was a big concern of the Park Advisory Board as well, is where are the people? And so I think one of the things that in lieu of, until the Parks Master Plan was completed, was adding, I think, 3 seasonal help from springtime here into the fall, I think was what was being discussed.
At least, I think we
yeah,
have
through-
6, don't we, Melissa?
Is it 6?
Is what we were. Six more.
6 more,
seasonals.
sorry, okay.
We're starting to see some people apply now. I think it's all this conversation and advertisement, word of mouth and all that's helping a lot.
Yeah. Can I follow up my question with just say, I think that you guys do an extraordinary job with the resources you have. And I don't want to in any way imply that I think that your work is inferior. You know that I'm a big fan of yours and I think you do exceptional work and I don't want to diminish that. I want to see us give you more resources is what I want.
We appreciate that and we had that conversation, but we want to be clear on how many we need. And so when we get the master plan done, I think that we'll have a conversation with the city administrator about that.
Yeah, and again, though, I do want to emphasize, we did give some, I guess you'd call it kind of that bridge of a cushion with adding some seasonal help to at least boost that up, if we can fill those positions, because we know what the job market is and we're trying really hard, and hopefully we'll fill those and get a little extra help, at least for our busiest season.
Yeah, if your child is coming home from college, please send them to our website where you can apply for this job.
For parks and public works, I think you have to be 18 and older.
Yep.
And it's a very good starting rate for those that are in colleges. Swim center
Is
you're
15.
15 and up
15
for
years
the
old to be a
swim
lifeguard, and so if you're watching or have family members, second, side gig, whatever, so.
And we learned last week the pool will train you as part of that. So if you're not a trained lifeguard, don't let that stop you.
There's our plea. Did we plug it well enough for you, Scott and Jerry?
That was good.
Okay, good. What other discussion items? Anything that's been parked that we should revisit? Anything that needs to be revisited, clarified? Going once, twice? All right, we'll consider that this point being discussed. Next up is approval of the City of Canby FY 22-23 budget and property tax rates to be levied. There's a pre-written motion there if anyone's inclined.
Mr. Mayor, I move that the Budget Committee of the City of Canby approve the budget for the 2022-2023 fiscal year in the amount of $80,721,281 and to levy property taxes for the 2022-2023 fiscal year in the amount of $3.4866 per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes and 49 cents per 1,000 of assessed value for the swim center local option levy.
All right, motion has been made by Counselor Spoon and seconded by Counselor Marine to approve the budget of the city, that the Budget Committee of the City of Canby approve the budget for the 22-23 fiscal year in the amount of $80,721,281 and to levy property taxes for the 2022-2023 fiscal year in the amount of $3.4886 per $1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes and 0.49 cents per $1,000 of assessed value for the swim center option levy. Any discussion or questions? Yes, Mr. City Administrator.
Just one kind of final comment from me before you take a vote. I want to acknowledge Eric's good work over there since the last meeting, and we sent you those revised worksheets. And just to confirm that the amount that is in the motion is the adjusted number. In fact, we're even in a better position with some of our fund balances than we were at the first draft of that. So that does reflect those changes, just so you know. But our expenditures did not change, just the bottom line total budget number because of the adjustment of the fund balances.
Great. Thank you, Scott, and thank you to the staff. And I know Eric came in and hit the ground running on this process, so thank you for your hard work as well and everyone's work from a staff perspective to make this happen. Any other comments? Yes, Council President Hensley.
I also wanted to thank Eric for his work and thank you for the revised packet. That was very helpful. And my vote will not reflect anything, in my opinion of your work. I think you did a very good job.
Thank you, appreciate it.
All right, if there's nothing else, I have a motion on the table. All those in favor of the motion at hand?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Nay.
Okay.
I just wanted on the record that everything was fine. I just wanted it on the record that I don't agree with the direction of the tech services fund.
Okay. With that, with the 2 noes, the motion still passes to approve budget as it is from the committee and move it on to the city council. Great. Yeah, there's a lot of work, definitely.
Thanks, Seth.
And thank you, citizen members.
Yeah, the citizen members too. To the point of the citizen members, I thank you for your involvement in this. This is not, as I said when we were interviewing Liz and Herman and Kara, the staff is in this day to day. We are not as even counselors into it day to day, but you as citizen committee members are in it even less than we are on a basis. So to come into this process and dive into these numbers and whatnot, especially being new to the process, thank you for putting in the work and the time. We will be doing more as we speed up because that's been something we as a council have been wanting to do. And so now that Eric has been through this process one time, and he knows what to expect, and he hasn't left screaming from the building yet, we'll hopefully
There's still time.
There is still time. That we'll be able to do some more budget and financial education for all of us moving forward. So thank you for that. Last item then is to take a motion to adjourn.
Second.
It has been. Did Liz? All right, so it's been motioned by Council President Hensley and seconded by Community Member Chapin to adjourn our meeting. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, our budget season is adjourned. Thank you, Canby. Thank you, staff. Appreciate the hard work.